It's amazing, isn't it, how fast everything changes in this space. Like, I swear, we were just figuring out what blockchain even was. And now, well, now it's all these layer twos and side chains and all these solutions for getting blockchains to talk to each other, you know.
It's a lot to keep up with.
It really is easy to get lost in the details. But hey, that's exactly why we do this deep dive thing, right? You send us the research, the articles, whatever's got you curious.
Well, we try to make sense of it, boil it down to the essentials.
Exactly. So this time, the stuff you sent over, it's about Eclipse, which I gotta say has been making a lot of noise lately.
For good reason. Definitely a project worth a closer look.
So we've got blog posts straight from the Eclipse team, plus a nice overview from CoinMarketCap. And what we're aiming for today is to, well, cut through the hype, you know? Really figure out, what are they actually doing with Eclipse? Why is this whole Solana on Ethereum thing such a big deal? And based on what they're saying, where are they on the roadmap? What's the potential here?
Sounds like a plan. And clearly, this stuff resonates with you. You're the one who flagged it. So I'm guessing you're pretty interested in how we make blockchains faster, more efficient, and how these different blockchain worlds, so to speak, might start working together more.
Absolutely. And Eclipse, well, they seem to be taking a pretty unique approach, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe the best place to start is, what is Eclipse exactly? This Solana on Ethereum tagline. Can we unpack that a little? What's the core idea?
Right. So basically, imagine you've got this super powerful engine, right? Designed for speed, that's Solana. And Eclipse. They're taking that engine and dropping it into Ethereum. Which, you know, Ethereum is like this rock-solid, well-established platform, tons of users, tons of assets.
Security. You can't forget about the security Ethereum brings.
Right, exactly. Security, too. So it's like they're giving Ethereum this speed boost, and I think their tagline actually nails it. Ethereum's fastest layer 2, powered by SVM. And when you read through these sources, they're laser-focused on two things. One, making things way faster for Ethereum users, and two, making the whole experience just smoother, you know?
Yeah, that comes through loud and clear. And the CoinMarketCap piece you sent, they frame it as basically weaving Ethereum and Solana together into this one seamless layer 2 solution. The goal being obviously faster transactions, lower fees, all that good stuff.
Exactly. But, okay, how do they actually pull this off? It can't be as simple as just like copy pasting, right? There's got to be some serious tech wizardry going on under the hood. We need to break down those key components.
Agreed. So you mentioned the Solana Virtual Machine, or SVM. That seems to be at the heart of it. How does that play into things? What does it bring to the table in terms of, say, speed, scaling, compared to the standard Ethereum virtual machine?
Okay, so the SVM, it's built from the ground up to handle a massive number of transactions per second, right? Unlike a lot of blockchains, including Ethereum's main network, the way Solana's architecture works, it allows for transactions to be processed in parallel. Think of it like lanes on a highway. More lanes, more cars can get through at once.
I like that analogy.
So instead of processing transactions one by one, like a single checkout line, the SVM is like having multiple checkout lanes open at once, and that's how Eclipse is getting around those limitations on Ethereum. And the CoinMarketCap article backs this up. They specifically talk about how Eclipse leverages Solana's ability to process transactions in parallel, which, in turn, you know, makes things more efficient, lets them handle more volume.
Makes sense. And then you have Ethereum on the other side of the equation, providing, you know, that bedrock. And the Eclipse website throws out some pretty big numbers here. Over 80 billion in stable coins on Ethereum. 66 billion in total value locked. So that's all the assets locked up in DeFi protocols. And then a market cap for Ethereum itself, somewhere around 450 billion. So there's already a ton of activity happening there.
A huge existing ecosystem, but it's not like Eclipse is directly built on Ethereum, right? We're talking about a modular architecture here. What does that even mean in this context? What are the pieces of this puzzle?
Right. It's more nuanced than that. So modularity in this case, it means they've broken down the whole system into these separate layers, right? Each layer handles a specific function. And the sources we're looking at, they highlight 4 main components.
Okay, let's hear them.
So first, you've got the settlement layer, which that happens on Ethereum. This is where transactions are finalized, disputes are settled. And of course, it's backed by Ethereum security. Right. Then there's the execution layer. This is where the actual work happens. Smart contracts are run, transactions are processed.
Yeah.
And that's all handled by the SVM, hence the speed.
Got it. So Ethereum's the judge, Solana's the workhorse. What else?
Right. Then you've got the data availability layer, which basically this ensures that all the transaction history is publicly accessible, verifiable, kind of like a public record. And for that, Eclipse uses Celestia, a whole network dedicated to just that, data availability.
Interesting. So it's not all on Eclipse's shoulders then. They're delegating some of this heavy lifting.
Exactly. And then the fourth component is proving, which this is all about making sure that the SVM, that it's actually executing transactions correctly. No funny business. Mm-hmm. And for that, they use something called RISC-0, which generates these cryptographic proofs like, hey, everything checks out here.
So it's like Ethereum for security and finality, Solana for the heavy lifting, Celestia as the record keeper, and RISC-0 is like the auditor, making sure everything's on the up and up.
Pretty good summary. And this modular design, like the CoinMarketCap article points out, it's not just about efficiency. It also gives them a lot of flexibility. If, say, a better way to handle data availability comes along, they can swap out that Celestia piece without having to re-architect the whole thing.
Future-proofing, in a way.
Exactly. And it also makes it easier for them to connect with other blockchains, which, this whole interoperability thing is kind of the holy grail.
Right. So Eclipse isn't just trying to be a faster Ethereum. They're aiming to be a more connected piece of the broader blockchain world. Now, let's talk progress. The sources mention some key milestones they've hit.
Yeah. So CoinMarketCap highlights the launch of their mainnet, which that happened in November 2024. But those blog posts you sent, they give us a more detailed look at the timeline, their progress so far.
And how they keep their community in the loop. They've got these Everything Eclipse newsletters, and we're seeing them pretty consistently from December 2024 through March 2025. So, they're keeping people updated on a regular basis.
It's like a progress report. Shows they're actively building and communicating. Mm-hmm. Another big step was the Eclipse Foundation, which that got set up in January 2025. And their whole idea there is to, decentralize governance, so the community has more control over the protocol's direction.
Makes sense. Most of these projects, that's where they're aiming, right? More community ownership.
For sure. Now, if we rewind a bit, their testnet actually launched back in December 2023 on Ethereum's of SOL-ETH testnet and Celestia's Mocha testnet. So early on, they were already showing that this whole modular approach could actually work.
Proof of concept.
Right. And then they opened up the Eclipse mainnet for developers in July 2024. Even had a Total Eclipse Challenge hackathon to get people building on it. So you could see a clear progression here. Testnet, then onboard the devs, launch the mainnet, and then set up the foundation to make it all more decentralized.
Smart. Very methodical. But a blockchain is only as good as its ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
What are we seeing in terms of dApps, partnerships? Who's using Eclipse and who are they teaming up with?
Well, when they announced their mainnet launch in November 2024, they claim to have over 60 dApps and service providers ready to go live on day one, which, for a brand new layer 2, that's a pretty impressive number. And then throughout 2024, they've announced a bunch of pretty high-profile partnerships.
Give me some highlights.
Okay, so one that stands out is Hyperlane. That partnership was back in September 2024. And Hyperlane, what they do is they basically connect blockchains. So with Hyperlane, Eclipse can talk to not just Ethereum, but also directly to Solana, which, that was a big part of their initial pitch, right? Seamless movement of assets between these two ecosystems.
Interoperability in action.
Exactly. Then there's Neon Stack. They partnered with them back in May 2024. And what's interesting about Neon Stack is they bring EVM compatibility to Eclipse, which means developers who are already familiar with Ethereum and Solidity, they can more easily port their applications over.
Makes it easier to attract developers, lower the barrier to entry.
Exactly. So even though Eclipse runs on the SVM, they're making it accessible to the huge pool of Ethereum devs out there.
Smart move. What other partnerships are worth mentioning?
Okay, so also in May 2024, they announced Pyth Network. They're providing their price feeds, those oracles, which are super important for DeFi. Then there's Turbo Game Engine. Another May 2024 announcement, that's this next-gen 2D game engine that's starting to take off on Eclipse. And then in September 2024, they did this big security push. Launched $1 million bug bounty program with Immunify.
Wow. $1 million, that's a serious commitment to security.
Yeah, no messing around there. And all these partnerships, by the way, they're all detailed in the partners section of their blog.
Great. So they're making the connections, building out the ecosystem. But what about the actual experience of using Eclipse? For both developers and users, what's it like? What are the advantages?
So they've got some pretty extensive documentation, like detailed guides on getting started, setting up the Eclipse wallet, how to bridge assets from Ethereum or Solana, all that stuff. They even have these technical details like RPC endpoints and block explorers, which, those are things developers need.
The nuts and bolts.
Right. And they've integrated with some popular Oracle providers like Pith, Switchboard, support various NFT standards like Metaplex, Nifty Asset, LibraPlex.
Sounds like they've got all the bases covered.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And they've also got these developer tools like Faucet for testnet tokens, benchmarking tools, plus really detailed tutorials like how to deploy a Hello World dApp, which is kind of the starting point for a lot of devs.
Right. Ease them in.
Exactly. And they've even got guides for how to modify existing Solana dApps to work on Eclipse. So again, they're making it as easy as possible for devs to jump over.
Very smart. Now, from a user perspective, what are the main selling points?
Low fees. They estimate fees to be around 0.0000022s, which compared to what you see on Ethereum, that's practically nothing.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge draw for a lot of people.
Definitely. And then there's this thing called Teeth. They launched that back in October 2024. It's a unified restaking token, basically a way to keep earning rewards while diversifying risk.
Interesting. So they're not just building a platform, they're also thinking about how to incentivize people to actually use it. But let's zoom out a bit. Beyond the tech, beyond the immediate benefits, what's the bigger picture here? What's Eclipse's long-term vision?
So in January 2025, they laid out this idea of the Eclipse economy. Their goal isn't just to be a blockchain, right? They want to be this global hub of economic activity. They even talk about like rethinking GDP for this new world of globally connected developers. It's pretty ambitious.
A whole new economic paradigm.
Exactly. And alongside that, they also released this document called the Eclipsean Dogma, which it's basically their core values, their principles for building a community. And they really stress the importance of people over numbers.
Not just about the token price.
Right. And they're very active about community building. In their documentation, they explicitly tell new users to engage with the community on Discord. That's their main hub. And then they got the Eclipse Creator Fund, announced in February and then again in November 2025, which that's all about supporting artists and creators inside Web3, but also outside of it. So they're really trying to cultivate a diverse, vibrant community.
That's great. So they're not just chasing technical innovation. They're also thinking about the people involved, the culture they're building. Now, none of this comes cheap, right? What do our sources tell us about their funding and how the wider crypto world is viewing them?
So back in March 2024, they closed a $50 million Series A funding round, led by Placeholder and Hack VC, which those are some pretty big names in the crypto VC space. And that brought their total funding to $65 million. So clearly, some serious investors believe in what they're doing.
65 million. That's not chump change.
Nope. And this news was all over the crypto media, by the way. Blockworks, CoinDesk, The Block, even an official announcement from Eclipse Labs themselves. And beyond the funding, you see them getting mentioned more and more by some pretty influential people and platforms. The Daily Gwei, Bankless, Delphi Digital, Masari. They've even been featured on podcasts like Amber Data and the Rollup. So, the word's definitely getting out.
Yeah, it seems like Eclipse is generating a lot of buzz, and for good reason. Now, the sources we have paint a pretty positive picture, but, it's always good to look at both sides. The CoinMarketCap article you mentioned, it had these sections in the table of contents, Eclipse ecosystem controversies, and transparent dealing, although we don't have the content for those sections. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's interesting. It does kind of suggest that there might be some questions or scrutiny surrounding the project, which, honestly, with anything new and ambitious in this space, you kind of expect that. And the transparent dealing heading, I'm guessing that's them trying to get ahead of any potential issues, being open about how they're handling things.
Yeah, transparency is huge in this space, especially when you're dealing with complex technology, bridging different blockchains. There are always going to be questions, concerns.
Absolutely. And being upfront about that, addressing those concerns head on, that builds trust.
For sure. Okay, we've covered a lot. Let's wrap this up with some key takeaways for our listeners.
So to sum it up, Eclipse is trying to do something pretty unique. They're bringing the Solana virtual machine with all its speed and processing power into the Ethereum world. And they're doing it through this modular architecture, using Ethereum for security, Solana for execution, Celestia for data availability, and RISC-0 for proving.
And they've already hit some pretty major milestones, launched their mainnet, made some key partnerships, and they've raised a good chunk of money.
Yeah, they've definitely got some momentum.
So for you, dear listener, if you're trying to stay ahead of the curve, Eclipse is definitely a project to watch. It's a great example of how developers are pushing the boundaries of blockchain tech, trying to get the best of both worlds,
Yeah. And it raises a really interesting question. What other crazy combinations of blockchain tech might we see? this whole modular approach. Could that be the future?
Something to ponder, for sure. And if you want to dig deeper into Eclipse, you know where to go. Check out their documentation, join their Discord.
Yeah, immerse yourself.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.
Take care.